On February 24, 2000, the body of 37-year-old mother Linda Fields was found brutally strangled to death in the front yard of her residence, situated at 1132 Lake Avenue in Racine, Wisconsin. At the time, the lack of evidence and leads meant that investigators had very little to work with, and the case would go cold for over 2 decades, and was only solved as recently as 2023. In this video, we'll explore the twists and turns of this intriguing murder mystery and how the pieces finally came together, leading to closure for Linda's loved ones and the community. Who was responsible for Linda's tragic death? How did they find the perpetrator? Racine is a city in Wisconsin, USA, and is the county seat of Racine County. It is located at the mouth of the Root River on the shore of Lake Michigan. Racine is about 22 miles south of Milwaukee and around 60 miles north of Chicago. It is the primary city in the Racine metropolitan area, which is part of the Milwaukee Combined Statistical Area. According to the 2020 U.S. Census, the population of Racine is 77,816, making it the 5th largest city in Wisconsin. In January 2017, it was named the most affordable place to live in the world by the Demographia International Housing Affordability Survey. It is here in Racine that our story begins in 2000. On February 24th in the year 2000, the lifeless body of a 37-year-old woman was discovered in the front yard of a residence situated at 1132 Lake Avenue in Racine, Wisconsin. The body was found beneath a pine tree with low-hanging branches by an individual out walking their dog in the early hours of the morning, who immediately reported it to the police. When police arrived at the crime scene, they identified the victim as Linda Fields. The Milwaukee Medical Examiner's Office conducted an autopsy, which revealed that Miss Fields had been strangled to death. They also collected unknown DNA samples from the body. The victim's body was found in a helpless state, deprived of any chance of survival. Such a gruesome act of violence left a permanent mark on the memories of those involved and the surrounding community. In May 2001, Sharon Polakowski, the medical examiner on the case, authored a lab report on multiple DNA samples that were collected, which indicated that all samples came from a single unknown male contributor and were identical. Despite entering the DNA profile into the case work index of the Wisconsin DNA Databank, Wisconsin Convicted Felons Database, and National DNA Database, no match was found at the time. The lead investigator at the time, Investigator Steve Mitch, interviewed numerous witnesses but was unable to make an arrest. In March of 2005, as part of an ongoing investigation, a decision was made to re-examine samples that had been previously collected but not yet analyzed. The hope was that these samples might yield new leads or information that could help move the investigation forward. After conducting further tests on these samples, it was discovered that one of them contained male DNA. This was an important discovery, as it provided a potential clue about the perpetrator of the crime in question. Upon further analysis, it was determined that the male DNA profile found on the sample was identical to the DNA profiles that had been previously identified. This finding added weight to the existing evidence and suggested that the male individual in question had been involved in the crime. This discovery was a significant breakthrough in the investigation and provided investigators with a new avenue to pursue in their quest for justice. Although the case was reassigned in 2005 and then again in 2020, no significant progress was made until the DNA of 5 suspects was compared with the unknown male DNA, and all 5 were eventually eliminated as suspects. Despite extensive efforts to solve the case, the identity of the unknown male DNA contributor remained a mystery. Eventually, as time went on, with no new leads to follow, The case went cold. During August of 2020, Chief Art Howell made the decision to reopen the investigation into the death of Linda Fields, which had remained unsolved for several years. The chief hoped that by re-examining the case with fresh eyes, new evidence or leads might be uncovered that could help to finally solve this long-standing mystery. Consequently, he instructed the investigations unit to prioritize the case and give it the attention it deserved. To carry out this renewed investigation, the task of reviewing the case was assigned to investigator Chris Blackmore in September 2020. Blackmore was selected for his extensive experience in the field of criminal investigations and his ability to analyze evidence and identify potential suspects. In order to further strengthen the team, he was also assisted by Special Agent Neil McGrath, who brought his own unique skills and expertise from the Wisconsin Department Justice Division of Criminal Investigations. Together, Investigator Blackmore and Special Agent McGrath worked tirelessly to comb through the existing evidence and follow up on any potential leads. They utilized the latest forensic technologies and conducted interviews with witnesses and persons of interest to gain a comprehensive understanding of the case. In April of 2021, Investigator Blackmore sought the assistance of several law enforcement professionals, including DCI Special Agent McGrath, FBI Agent Sarah Deamron, and DNA analyst Natalie Fisher of the State of Wisconsin Crime Lab. After analyzing the DNA evidence collected from the crime scene, Fisher determined that there was enough DNA extract to proceed with an investigative genetic genealogy (IgG) analysis. The Wisconsin Crime Lab also had the capability to move forward with the familial search analysis, which involves comparing the DNA sample to DNA profiles of family members in a database. In May of 2021, the DNA evidence was sent to Othram, a company specializing in forensic DNA analysis. Othram scientists use a technique called forensic-grade genome sequencing to produce a comprehensive genealogical profile from the DNA sample. The profile was then sent back to the FBI, where the genealogy team used it to conduct further genetic genealogy research. The process of genetic genealogy involves comparing the DNA profile to other profiles in public and private databases to identify potential relatives of the individual whose DNA was collected. This process can help law enforcement agencies identify suspects in criminal investigations by tracing their familial relationships. With the genealogical profile provided by Othram, the FBI's genealogy team was able to advance the investigation and identify potential suspects in the case. In the course of an investigation led by Special Agent McGrath, it was discovered that a male person of interest had a brother and a father who was still alive. To advance the investigation, a plan was devised to obtain a DNA sample from the brother. FBI agent Mark Dring lent his expertise to the plan, which ultimately resulted in a DNA sample being collected from the brother and submitted to the crime lab. The analysis of the DNA sample from the brother excluded him as a potential suspect in the case. Later, in December 2002, the focus of the investigation shifted towards the father. With the help of Lieutenant Paul Hayes of the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency State Bureau of Investigation, Special Agent McGrath was able to determine that the father was currently living in Birmingham, Alabama. A plan was being developed to collect DNA from the father in Alabama when they discovered that he had recently traveled to Zion, Illinois, and was residing there. To proceed with the collection of the father's DNA, a search warrant was drafted and issued. The search warrant granted the authorities the legal right to collect a DNA sample from the father, which would be analyzed to determine if he could be connected to the crime being investigated. With the cooperation of law enforcement officers and relevant agencies, the search warrant was executed, and the DNA sample was collected from the father for further analysis. In February of 2023, a DNA sample was collected from the father and subsequently sent to the laboratory for analysis. In early March of the same year, investigator Blackmore was informed by Polakowski that the buccal swab from the father was a match to the DNA obtained from Linda Fields. According to Polakowski, the likelihood of a random person's DNA matching that of the DNA profile taken from Linda Fields' body was 1 in 1 quadrillion. This statistic highlighted the significance of the DNA match and strengthened the case against the father, who was identified as Lucas Alonzo. According to Blackmore, within the past year, Alonzo had moved from Alabama to Illinois and had landed a job in Wisconsin. Blackmore expressed that the timing of Alonzo's job starting in Racine and the results from the lab confirming a match couldn't have been any better. However, in February, Alonzo was stopped at a traffic check, and as Blackmore explained, Alonzo's DNA was actually collected during the traffic stop, the day before the anniversary of the homicide. On 23 February 2023, Lucas Alonzo, a resident of Zion, Illinois, was detained by authorities at his workplace in Racine. This came after he was brought in for questioning regarding the death of Linda Fields, with whom he had reportedly been seen leaving a local bar all those many years ago. During his interrogation, Alonzo admitted to having had sexual intercourse with Fields after they were dropped off near the lakefront. However, he also claimed that he had strangled her in a fit of anger after a heated argument. Alonzo maintained that he thought Fields was still alive when he left the scene of the incident, as she was apparently still shouting at him at the time. Nonetheless, authorities took him into custody on suspicion of murder, and he was subsequently arrested at his workplace. The investigation into Fields' death is ongoing, and authorities are still trying to piece together what exactly happened on the night in question. However, with Alonzo's admission of guilt, it appears that they may be closer to finding the answers they seek. On March 8, 2023, Alonzo appeared in court for the first time, and it was noted that a cash bond had been set for him at a whopping sum of $1 million. This amount of money would need to be paid up front in order for Alonzo to be released from custody while he awaits further legal proceedings. The establishment of such a high bond amount suggests that the nature of Alonzo's alleged offense is quite serious, and the court wants to ensure that he remains in custody until the matter is fully resolved. According to Carl Fields, son of Linda Fields, the recent news about the arrest of the suspect in his mother's decades-old murder case has brought a sense of closure to their family. He expressed his gratitude and acknowledged that they are now closer to achieving justice. Carl mentioned that he had always held on to the hope that the truth about his mother's murder would be uncovered someday, and it seems that day has finally arrived. He added that they had to live with the burden of the unsolved case for a long time, but now they can finally find solace. In conclusion, Carl is thankful that this day has come, and he expressed his gratitude for it. The breakthrough in the case was the result of the tireless effort of multiple law enforcement agencies over the years. The Racine Police Department, led by Chief Maurice Robinson, expressed their hope that this successful resolution would restore hope to other families who are still waiting for justice for their loved ones. They extended their heartfelt thanks to the Department of Criminal Investigations, particularly Agent McGrath and Agent Juanez, the FBI, and the State Crime Lab for their invaluable support in cracking this case. Special recognition was also given to Lieutenant Paul Hayes for his assistance in Alabama and to Chief Art Howell and other members of the Racine Police Department for their unwavering dedication to finding justice for Linda Fields. The arrest of the suspect in Linda Fields' murder is a reminder that justice is always possible, no matter how much time has passed. The tireless efforts of law enforcement agencies in pursuing justice for victims and their families are commendable, and their commitment to this cause should inspire us all. The closure that this development has brought to Linda Field's family is a testament to the importance of perseverance, hope, and the unwavering pursuit of truth and justice. After 23 years of uncertainty and pain, justice has finally been served. For the family and loved ones of the victim, this moment is bittersweet. But what did you think of the case? What do you think Lucas Alonso's sentence should be? On June 28, 2004, workers found an unknown torso lying near the bushes of the Wright City rest stop in the state of Missouri. The tragedy with the torso was that there was no way to identify it. It had no head, arms, or legs, making it almost impossible for detectives to find any leads on its identity. Was it a hate crime? And how did the police find out the identity of a torso? The answer to all these questions lies in the belly of a cold case that was solved after 18 years of constant struggle. The small city of Wright City, Missouri is an often overlooked destination for those seeking an outdoor adventure. With plenty of outdoor activities available throughout the area, there's something for everyone. Whether you're looking for an adrenaline-filled adventure or simply want to enjoy nature, you'll find it in Wright City. From hiking and biking trails to swimming holes, fishing spots, and more, there are endless opportunities for outdoor activities in Wright City. Boating on Lake Calhoun, camping on state park grounds, biking through wooded trails, it has something for everyone. From its historical buildings to its sweeping landscapes, Wright City is the perfect destination for those seeking a true small-town experience. One of the main benefits of living in the Midwest is a low crime rate compared to cities on either coast. Residents feel safe at night knowing that they're surrounded by a tight-knit community. But this was not the case in 2004, as the small town was shaken by a gruesome discovery. It was a slow morning in the small town of Wright City on June 28, 2004. The town isn't a busy place after all. Like any other day, some workers were preparing to tidy up the picnic area near the Wright City rest stop on Interstate 70. Some were watering the plants, others were picking up litter. A group of workers were responsible for trimming the bushes of the shrubs that encased the picnic spot so that the people might not find sitting there difficult. But they had no idea that this cleaning would result in something that was so gruesome that even the police would struggle with it for 18 years. While trimming the bushes, some workers found that there was an odd thing thrown inside the deep end of the picnic area. When the workers went closer to check and see what the odd thing was, they discovered a carcass. At first, they thought that it was a mannequin, but they were wrong. It was the torso of a lady. The whole body was not in place. The only thing that the workers could see was a torso without a face, hands, or even legs. They knew that everything about this was wrong and called the police on the spot. When the police came, they discovered that the torso was wearing a black bra and had 2 surgery marks near the abdomen. The police quickly theorized that these marks were likely from a cesarean procedure or an appendectomy. As the police spread in the area, they started looking sporadically for other clues nearby. While searching, some police officers found a knife in a sewer nearby that had foreign DNA on it. The police also found DNA on the torso that did not belong to the victim. Now the police believed that this foreign DNA was likely that of the killer. But the only problem was that there was no way to identify the victim. The police looked around for the other dismembered body parts of the torso around the whole city, but they couldn't find any. It was as if each part of the body had been cut off and disposed of in different cities altogether. At first, the police were confused as there was no way that they could physically identify the body. The body had no face, no hands, no legs, just a torso and a black bra. One thing that the police could do was to take the DNA of the unidentified torso and match it with a family member. But again, when the body isn't identified, there are no named family members. The police couldn't possibly go to every house in Wright City and ask for their DNA samples, and they didn't even know if the torso belonged to someone who lived in Wright City. The difficulty in this case was jarring. Imagine having to identify a body that has no relatives, no place, no hands, no legs, and not even a face. The only thing that would keep the investigation going was if someone came up to the police and told them that the body found near the picnic area was known to them. And that was exactly what happened. In 2016, Brian Barker, a local police officer, was caught and charged with penalties for offenses he had committed. When Brian was in custody, he told the police that he had filed a missing persons report in 2006 that had never been addressed. He also added that the torso found in Wright City's picnic spot could be his sister's. Now, this might have been because Brian really loved his sister, or maybe he just wanted to help the police so that he could be relieved of some of the offenses he had committed. Earlier, in 2006, Brian Barker had gone to the police and told them that his sister had been missing for 2 years and that the police should file a report. The police did so. Brian's case was not worked on from then because Brian had no idea where his sister could be, and the police had no way of finding her. But Brian Barker's story did not end there. Brian Barker was a notorious police officer. He had committed a lot of offenses on duty and would continue to do so for years to come. During 2009 to 2014, the Edwardsville Police Department received many complaints regarding business-related burglaries. These complaints averaged out to be almost 24 a year. Long story short, after the arrest of Brian Barker, these complaints got lowered to almost 6 a year. It was because Brian, apart from being a corrupt police officer, was also a goon. His trick was to use his police badge to intimidate people and commit fraud or larceny. He was said to have stolen firearms and also committed residential burglaries around the area. For his grievous misconduct, the court ordered a 40-year sentence to the 43-year-old Barker. So maybe it was in Barker's favor to help the police with the unknown torso case so he could try and get some time off his sentence. In 2014, Warren County Sheriff Lieutenant Matt Schmutz reopened the torso case. In 2016, the police took Brian's DNA sample and tried to match it with the torso. The samples did not match, and the police began to suspect that Brian was lying so he could earn goodwill. But Brian insisted that the torso was his sister's, and so the police gave Brian's DNA another try. But this time, the police also secured DNA from other members of the family. Again, a new DNA sample was taken from the torso and sent to the labs for testing. DNA sampling is a very tricky process. It could be that a father's and daughter's DNA do not match, but the father's and the niece's DNA matched perfectly. This is what had happened earlier with Brian's DNA. It had not matched the torsos. But now, when the other family members pitched in and gave their samples too, the DNA samples matched. After multiple matches of the DNA samples obtained from the family members, more importantly, from Ashley Kinnear, who was the daughter of Brian's sister, it was confirmed that the torso found did indeed belong to Brian's sister. At last, the police had a breakthrough, and they now knew that the unknown torso belonged to Deanna Denise Howland. But now, a bigger problem arose. Deanna had no known home and not even a single surname. She had used many surnames as she was married more than once and had 5 children from different fathers. Deanna Denise Howland grew up partly in both Collinsville and Edwardsville. Her father was a banker and a union leader. Her childhood was not financially deprived, but as she grew older, life became much more cruel towards her. Among other things, she also fell into the gruesome trap of drug addiction. Gradually, she started becoming one of those family members that go out too often and come home very rarely. As an addict, she had no money to support herself, and with the rise in police forces all over America, the buying and selling of drugs also became a costly job. It was inevitable for Deanna to fall into poverty. She knew that she would never be able to support her family, and thus she never stayed with them. What was more important for Deanna was to support herself, but with her addiction issues, even that was becoming more and more difficult. Poor Deanna chose the hardest way to survive. She chose to become a prostitute. Prostitution seemed like the only way for her to survive while buying drugs in a small town. All through her adult life, Deanna was involved with many men who would find her explicit jobs so that Deanna could make more money. Her job and her lifestyle both were notorious, and so Deanna also had many run-ins with the police. Due to her habits, she also went to jail multiple times. Her daughter, Ashley Kinnear, said that Deanna's trips to jail were so frequent that it almost became easy for her to survive jail. Deanna, whenever she would get out of jail, would make sure to make time for her children and meet them. They would have dinner together, and Deanna would leave soon after. Ashley, despite being away from her mother for most of her life, cared about Deanna deeply, and she could tell that Deanna loved her too, even though she was hardly around. She said that Deanna never forgot her birthday and would call her every year. Before Deanna went missing, she promised Ashley to show up for a play Ashley was acting in. But Deanna never came back the day after, and Ashley knew that something had gone wrong. Howland went by several names, including her maiden name Deanna Barker, as well as Deanna Kinnear and Deanna Froelich. Court documents report that she was born in Belleville and married in 1991 with at least 2 children before divorcing 4 years later. Her family couldn't be reached or preferred not to comment. According to Captain Dan DeCarly of the Major Case Squad of Greater St. Louis, Howland led a transient lifestyle and was estranged from her relatives. She was last seen around Granite City and East St. Louis, as well as Alton, before her disappearance in May 2004. Exploring the ancestry and relations of a missing person isn't new for the State Police of Missouri. Recently, a decade-old case of a missing person named T.J. Emily was solved using the genetic genealogy program. On the night of March 25, 1990, T.J. Emily left his home for a walk, but he never returned. A missing persons case was filed in the same year, but nothing was found, just like in the case of Deanna. 2 years later, on March 7, 1992, a skeleton was found in an old abandoned building. The police tried to identify the DNA of the skeleton, but couldn't do so. Years later, the case was reopened, and the police collaborated with an NGO called the DNA Doe Project. Through a rigorous process and after 20 long years, the police found out that the skeleton was T.J. Emily's. Another terrible case was solved in 2019 using genetic genealogy. In 1993, 9-year-old Angie Houseman went out of her house but never came back. Her body was discovered in a conservation area near St. Louis 9 days after she went missing. She had been left there by her kidnapper to die, and ultimately she died of asphyxiation as her mouth had been sealed by duct tape. DNA was sampled from the trimmed piece of Angie's underwear and sent to the lab. Years later, using genetic genealogy, the police found out that Angie's killer was one Earl Webster Cox, who had been retired from the Navy. Coming back to Deanna's case, a similar thing happened here. Once the police found out that the unknown torso belonged to Deanna DeLise Howland, they started testing the murderer's DNA that was found on the torso and on the knife that was at the crime scene. DNA was extracted from the lower end of Deanna's torso, and some was recovered from the knife that the police found in the sewer. The police took the DNA sample from the knife in 2019. Once the police had secured the DNA, they sent the samples to lab in order for them to be tested by researchers at the Genetic Genealogy program. After constant tests for almost 3 years and the ongoing advancements in genetic genealogy, the police were able to narrow their search gradually. Eventually, they found their man, Mike A. Clardy. When the police tracked him down, Mike A. Clardy was living in Maryland Heights with his wife. More importantly, Mike A. Clardy was blind. But was he blind at the time of Deanna's death? No. Mike went blind after the killing of Deanna in a totally unrelated incident. While in police custody, Mike confessed that he was the one who killed Deanna on the night of June 28, 2004. Now, why did Mike kill Deanna? Because it is important to note that Mike wasn't a serial killer, nor was he a criminal. Apart from the Deanna case, he had never been in police custody for anything, let alone murder. Then what happened that day? According to Mike's version of the story, Deanna came to Mike's house. Deanna at that time worked as a prostitute, and Mike brought her jobs to be done. Mike at that time lived at the 3500 block on Dixie Drive, St. Anne, and Deanna used to frequent his house. On the night of June 26, 2004, Mike and Deanna fell into an argument. The argument surpassed all bounds, and Mike's anger surpassed his sanity. Ultimately, Mike killed Deanna and dismembered her body. The torso was thrown at Wright City Rest Stop, and other parts were thrown all around St. Louis County and Warren County. The other parts of Deanna's body were never recovered. For Mike's neighbors, it was impossible to see him in this light. They had never imagined the 63-year-old blind man would be behind this. Mike now faces a life sentence, and his bail is set on $1 million. As for the family of Deanna, it is a sad story after all. Most of her family forgot about her as soon as she went missing. Society always attaches a stigma with drug addicts and prostitutes, but nevertheless, her daughter, Ashley Kinnear, will always remember her mother Deanna and how she loved her. Ashley was very emotional and overwhelmed when the police finally caught hold of Deanna's killer. At least Ashley, of all people, got her closure. After almost 2 decades, justice had finally been served thanks to the tireless efforts of law enforcement and forensic experts who refused to give up on this case. While it can't bring back Deanna and her love for her daughters, it is a reminder for all killers that they can't hide away forever and will always be found guilty for their heinous acts. What are your thoughts on this case? Share your opinions in the comment section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating true crime stories. Until next time, stay safe and keep your eyes peeled for the next mystery to unfold.